Silence in the medieval world was not emptiness, it was protection. In a society where words carried weight far beyond intention, speaking was never neutral. Every phrase could be overheard, remembered, repeated, and reshaped. Ordinary people learned early that survival depended not on what you believed, but on what you allowed to escape your mouth. Silence reduced risk. It narrowed the number of threats you created simply by existing. Life unfolded in constant proximity to others. Homes were crowded, walls thin, streets close, communities tightly bound. There was no private space where thoughts could be safely expressed. Someone was always near, listening without appearing to listen. In such conditions, silence became the only territory a person could fully control. It was the last boundary between the inner self and a world that reacted harshly to deviation. Fear did not always arrive as violence. More often it existed as anticipation. People sensed that speaking too freely attracted attention, and attention was dangerous. Silence was learned not through instruction, but through observation. Those who spoke openly faced suspicion, isolation, or quiet consequences that were never explained aloud. The lesson spread without words. You did not need to be told to be careful. You watched what happened to others and adjusted yourself. Speech required confidence, and confidence was rare. Most people lived close to hunger, illness, and instability. Their energy was focused on maintaining balance, not challenging it. Saying less meant disturbing less. Silence preserved routine. It allowed a person to remain within accepted boundaries without actively agreeing with them. You did not need to support the system. You only needed to avoid provoking it. Over time, silence stopped feeling like a strategy and became a habit. Thoughts stayed internal. Doubts were processed privately. Emotions were restrained before reaching the surface. This created a specific psychological structure. People learned to live inwardly while presenting a neutral exterior. Expression was filtered. Identity was compressed. What mattered was not authenticity, but safety. Silence also reinforced obedience. When people do not speak, they do not easily coordinate. When they do not share doubts, they experience them alone. Isolation weakens resistance without requiring force. Authority benefited from this condition without needing to enforce it constantly. The population regulated itself. Silence became an invisible mechanism of control, embedded into daily life. What emerged was not agreement, but caution. People could feel injustice, fear instability, or sense decay, yet still remain quiet. Silence allowed survival in an environment where being noticed carried consequences. And as this behavior repeated across generations, it stopped feeling imposed. It felt normal. Speaking became the exception. Remaining silent felt like common sense. As silence became normal, it began shaping how people understood themselves. When thoughts are rarely spoken, they start to feel uncertain, incomplete, even dangerous. Individuals learned to doubt their own perceptions before doubting the surrounding order. Silence did not only hide disagreement from others, it slowly erased the confidence that disagreement could be meaningful at all. What was not spoken felt less real, less valid, less worthy of action. This inward pressure created a society where tension accumulated quietly. Fear had no outlet. Anger had no language. Suffering remained private and fragmented. Without shared expression, hardship felt personal rather than structural. Each person assumed they endured alone. This isolation reduced the possibility of collective response. Silence kept people separated, even when they lived side by side. Authority did not need constant visibility to remain powerful. Silence did the work in advance.
People measured their words internally before ever speaking. The boundary between thought and speech became heavily guarded. Over time, many stopped crossing it altogether. The safest position was neutrality. To say nothing was to avoid being misinterpreted, remembered, or marked. Silence also reshaped morality. When speaking about injustice carried risk, endurance replaced protest. Survival became the highest value. People judged actions less by right and wrong and more by consequences. Remaining silent during suffering was not seen as betrayal. It was seen as wisdom. The quiet person was not admired, but trusted, because they attracted less danger. Children absorbed this logic early. They learned when not to ask questions, when not to react, when to lower their presence. Silence became a form of maturity. The ability to restrain speech signaled awareness of how the world worked. Those who failed to learn this skill stood out, and standing out was unsafe. Over time, silence reshaped community itself. Relationships became cautious, trust weakened, conversations stayed shallow. Words were chosen carefully, stripped of anything that could imply doubt or defiance. People shared space, labor, and fear, but rarely shared truth. This limited emotional connection and reinforced distance, even among neighbors. Silence did not mean peace. It meant pressure without release. A society trained to remain quiet carried its stress internally, storing it in the body and mind. Survival continued, but at a cost. Emotional expression narrowed. Empathy became restrained. Life was endured rather than lived. In this world, silence was not passive. It was active, constant, and necessary. It kept people alive, but it also kept them small. It reduced danger, but it reduced possibility. What could not be spoken could not be changed. And so silence protected the individual, while quietly preserving the conditions that made silence necessary in the first place.